Since 2010, I've had a secret Santa, and nobody has ever come forward to tell me it's them. I should preface that this isn't an elaborate prank by some vengeful ex or an old friend. Not one of the gifts I've been sent has ever been of that nature. In all honesty, so many of them have just been odd. It started in December of 2010. I was a university student and grappling with the loss of my father. Not physically, mind you, but mentally. He suffered a debilitating stroke at the tail end of that year, and his mind never truly recovered. Early onset Alzheimer's disease, they called it. He was only 58. Still, he persisted and made the best out of the life he had left, cracking jokes but slowly showing a diminishing vigor which he was always known for. I remember coming home from a visit to his hospital bed one night, saying goodnight to my mom, and driving back to my dorm a couple 100 miles away. It was long, but I needed the time to process my own emotions and get a good night's sleep in my own space. When I got back to my front reception, the concierge told me a package had been left for me. This was especially odd, as I didn't have any expected packages, and none of my close friends were the type to just send out gifts from out of the blue. But I accepted it, and took it back into my dorm, carefully holding the black-wrapped box, with a finger tucked under the delicately brown string. I set it down on my desk, and looked at the note attached. It was simple, but each word held such weight that I felt my throat dry before I'd even finished. Theo, yours is the road less traveled. Do not veer off of it. Your Secret Santa. Flipping over the card, I saw the small phrase, Dum Spiro Sparrow, with a Tor link attached. I quickly tried to check it out, but it presented me with a black screen and a passcode, so I left it. They'd known I'd been driving back here? But how? I'd only gotten the news about my dad's stroke the day before, and I'd been on campus ever since. Pressing onward, I unwrapped the box and carefully lifted it up, revealing something that sent shivers down my spine. Sitting on a pillow was a license plate covered in blood. It was my license plate. I immediately called the police, checking my car, and quizzed the concierge on who left it. Naturally, no route led me anywhere. Since my car was fine, with the number plate still attached, and the package was sent via courier, there was nothing I could do. I calmed myself down after a few hours and set it aside, not wanting to get rid of it in fear of fraudsters, but too terrified to keep it in my sight. I moved the box with the rest of my things and put the note on my desk. Maybe I'd return to it one day when I felt up to it, but not now. The following year was less kind. Dad suffered a burst in his aneurysm during open surgery to remove it and was put into a medically induced coma. Christmas was spent at his bedside in the ICU, urging him to wake up, but yielding no response. There is something so otherworldly about being in a room full of people that aren't alive or dead. It's truly indescribable to those who have never experienced it, but you very much feel like you're walking in a realm not of your own. I would sit at his bedside for so long, trying to coax him out of his coma with music, stories about politics, anything, but to no avail. On Christmas Day, exhausted and emotionally spent, I kissed him on the forehead and wished him well, leaving to spend it with my mother. As I was leaving, however, The head nurse stopped me, pointing to another black box.
Someone left you this. Said they knew they'd find you here,
she said, staring at it surprised.
We normally get gifts of patience, but this is unusual.
It only then came back to me the year before. I took it with shaking hands and in my car began to inspect the next note. Theo, some nights are more dangerous than others. Be clear of mind. Your Secret Santa. This time, there was a pill bottle filled to the brim with raisins and a small makeshift pump affixed to it like some macabre art piece. I felt sick, and my head was spinning. Why would they do this? At a time when I was most vulnerable? I broke down in my car and screamed on the way home to help shift the rising bile in my stomach. Not wanting, nor capable of understanding such confusing actions at a time like this. That was how it went, year after year, until this year. Some years, it would be simple. But the elusive messages about taking heed of the next year and others would be harder to ignore. In 2015, my mother passed away from lung cancer, and I was sent a box containing a small cassette tape labeled "My First Mixtape for Mum" and a note reading, Theo, there is as much joy to be found in memory as there is in sorrow. The key is balancing it. Your Secret Santa. She died listening to the mixtape. The tape went missing, though, when I asked to retrieve it from the hospice. I cried a lot that day, with it on repeat, softly singing the same song she'd hummed to me as I grew up. In 2016, the year my daughter passed away, was especially hard. A pain, like no other, ripped through my soul and threatened to take everything with it, leaving nothing but a hollowed-out shell of a man in its wake. Being straight edge, with no alcohol, drugs, or cigarettes in the system, left the emotions raw and untinged by coping mechanisms, something my grief was desperate to gorge itself on. It was early December, a month since we lost her, and I was despondent, spending my time in my home and speaking to as few people as I could. Most people knew to give me space, but that didn't stop the occasional well-wisher. A knock at the door. I ignored it. I wanted nothing to do with the living, hoping they'd simply go away and fade into obscurity as I wished to do myself, if time allowed for it. They knocked twice, then a third time, before I mustered the courage to get up and face the incessant stranger, only to be met, once again, with a black box and a note. My hands shook, and my eyes watered as I turned the note over in my hands. Theo, I know the shadow looms over you, but do not let it blot out the small light you now keep. Your Secret Santa. Accompanying this note was a small toy car, crushed from the roof inwards, red paint dripping down the sides. I ran out my apartment block, screaming to the high heavens for who they were and demanding that they came out and faced me. But my pained yelling was only met with abject silence. I was distraught. My pain brought me to the surface, and mounds of salt rubbed into the wounds for good measure. Instead of going back inside, I jumped into my car and went round to the hospice where my father now resided. He was succumbing slowly but surely to the illness, and while it was forever painful to see him in that state, time spent with family around the holidays is always vital. He was asleep when I went in. His head drooped to the side in his armchair while reading a favorite novel of his, snoring heavily as I forced a smile and sat down. I was comforted by the quiet of spending time with a person who would never ask me about the pain I was holding on to, even if that was because he couldn't remember it happening. He began mumbling something under his breath, and I couldn't make it out. He had a habit of doing this when his energy was weak or if he couldn't quite get his words out, so I wasn't sure if it was sleep talking or his inability to get up. I leaned in closer. "Everything okay, Dad?" I asked, putting my ear closer to his mouth.
"Let it move,"
he grumbled between heavy breaths. "Let what move? Is your leg falling asleep?"
"No. A shadow. Let it move."
He was a bit clearer this time, and slowly pulled a hand up towards the far corner of his room. My eyes followed the direction of his finger, and for just a moment, I saw a shape twist in the background before fading completely. Chalking it up to tiredness and grief, I sighed and put him into bed before seeing myself out. It's amazing what a trip can do to your misery sometimes, because when I got home that evening, while I was still riddled with grief, I had pushed the Secret Santa incident to the back of my mind and resolved to work through what was going on, one step at a time. Sure enough, as time went on, I got better and moved past it. 2017's Secret Santa gift was one of my own books, and emblazoned with small feet on the cover, the letter reading, "Theo, grief takes small steps at a time, but you will eventually take strides. Your Secret Santa." Another attempt at cracking the Tor link was met with failure. Last year's gift was a diorama of an empty house with a body laying in bed as poorly crafted Christmas decorations hung about the place. The front door was boarded up. "Theo, isolation can be the most insidious pain. Give thanks when it is broken. Your Secret Santa." In the spring, my ex-partner was found in her home. She had hung herself on Christmas Day and wasn't found for 3 months. She'd shut the world out years ago, and the note she left behind simply read, "I'm going to be with my daughter. I'm sorry. I'm going home." I was deeply pained by her loss, but it had been so many years since we saw one another. I was thankful she at least found her peace in a way I never could. Again, I would ponder the Secret Santa identity and try to crack the Tor login, but to no avail. This year, however, was different. It was last week, and I just began packing for my trip overseas. A year away was something I knew I desperately needed, and was a prime way of pushing the reset button on everything. I loaded up the car and was almost ready to pull away when a black truck pulled up outside the property. It looked like a UPS van, but had no markings, logos, or indications of the company. A young man stepped out. He was clad in a UPS-style outfit, but black from head to toe, sporting a hoodie instead of a cap. "Package for Theodore Leo?" he asked. A low but friendly voice as I nodded, and he handed me the box, before promptly turning on his heel and heading back to the van. "Aren't you going to ask me to sign it?" I called back, holding the box carefully as he turned and our eyes met. Dumb Spiro Sparrow, Mr. Leah. He smiled and drove off, turning a corner and out of sight. Unsure of what to expect, I went indoors and set the larger box on the counter, unwrapping the familiar black paper and gently taking apart the string before looking at the note. Theo, these gifts have been many, but this will be the last. The pact is ending, and it is time for the inheritance to pass. The choice is yours, as it always has been. Dumb Spiro Sparrow, your secret Santa. Inside was a sight that didn't just chill me to the bone, but it left my eyes watering and my heart threatening to beat out of its chest. I called the hospice, but no answer. I jumped in my car, breaking every speed limit imaginable to get there in time, rushing through the doors as a flabbergasted receptionist called the head nurse over. The look on her face told me everything I needed to know, and I collapsed to my knees, sobbing uncontrollably. My father, the last member of my family, had passed away in his sleep. In the box was a photo of him, holding me as an infant, with the tour link dutifully left above it once again. The word inheritance plastered across it. It took until midnight, but I mustered up the courage to finally look over the website. Entering the password sent me to a dark web market called Mott's Emporium, and offered various services like keeping tabs on someone, sending a death threat, or making someone disappear, and with various descriptions of the types of people that had been assigned to their employment, though it sounded suspiciously like slavery to me. As soon as I went to the testimonial section, however, a video popped up. It was my dad, much younger and sitting at my hospital bed as a teen. He was tired, his brown hair already fading to gray, and his hands shaking as he spoke to the camera. Hey, son. If you're seeing this, then you're much, much older, and hopefully in a better place than you are right now. You've probably had more than a few coincidences in your life, and things that, at the time, made you feel even worse than you could ever imagine. But this was by design. He paused, turning the camera to my bed as an emaciated, comatose me breathed slowly, hooked up to a ventilation machine. You tried to take your own life, Theo. They say that you're going to be different when you wake up. The note you left makes no sense. I don't know what to do. But someone approached me with an offer, and I don't think I can refuse it. He leaned in, fear in his eyes, but the desperation of a parent glimmered in his eyes. Son, something came to me last night and told me they'd look out for you in exchange for, well, me. If I do this, they say they'll find a way to keep you safe and happy. The trade-off is, well, he paused, welling up as the realization came over him. Well, I won't remember any of it. Not once. But it's worth it. In order to see you grow into the man I know you can be, to give you the chance you deserve to beat this. Our family has a saying, Theo. It's while I breathe, I hope. Or, to put it in the native tongue. Fresh tears rolled down my face as a shadow formed from the corner of the room, and the two spoke in unison. Dumb Spiro Sparrow.
leave your message